It is my greatest pleasure that I welcome to this gathering the outgoing public protector of South Africa, Advocate Thuli Madonsela. Thank you so much. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, David.
Where were you born, ma'am?
I was born in Johannesburg, yes.
In which township? Because very few blacks your age were born in the suburbs.
I was born in the suburbs, but
Really?
I was brought up in Soweto, a small township called Dlamini.
Okay.
It's about 400 houses, but there's Dlamini 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And close to Morocco Police Station.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
What's your mother's name?
Nora Nomasonto.
Nomasonto.
Yes.
And what's your father's name?
Simon Bafana Madonsela.
Simon Bafana Madonsela.
Yes.
And what are the ethnic backgrounds?
My mother is Zulu,
Yeah.
and my father Swazi speaking.
Okay. Take us back to your growing up in Soweto. Give me a sense of what was happening there.
Well, I think I recall the street in Dlamini that it was dusty at the time,
Yeah.
and there were some rocks. And in my early years, it must have been when I just started being awake to how life was. I was exposed to the effects of the Black Administration Act.
Yeah.
And I remember those people that were called blackjacks, and
Okay.
you wouldn't know them. I don't
You'd
think
be surprised.
anybody in this room would know people called blackjacks, but they were the police, the municipal police,
Yeah.
who would come to people's houses looking for people without
Yeah.
without passes or
Yeah.
reference books.
Yeah.
That's one of my recollections. I also have recollections of my parents working as hawkers or informal traders.
Okay.
And my father telling me those stories of how he was a hero.
Yeah.
You know, when they talk about the lions telling their stories, let the lions tell this. He was telling his stories the way a hunter tells the story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of him being arrested for trading without a license.
Yes.
And going to court unrepresented and telling the magistrate that you have no right to judge me because it's your government that's not giving me a trading license.
That's true.
And yeah.
And do you have any siblings? And what are their names?
I have, right now I have 2 surviving siblings from my 2 parents.
Yeah.
Musa Madonsela, who still lives in Soweto,
Okay.
Fox Lake, and close to Dlamini, and
Yeah.
Jabulile, who got married when we were studying in Swaziland and lives in Swaziland.
Yeah.
I have another brother, Sigelela, who is from my mother's previous marriage.
Okay.
Yes. And I have other brothers. Oh God, they'll say I've forgotten them. My father had 2 marriages before my mother. So
Okay.
I have brothers in Davidton.
Yeah.
Yes. I think the surviving one is Boy, and my sister is Mangele. And then and
It's a big family. You have to
it's a very
think
big
about
family.
it
I have to, because there's two marriages before
before your mom.
my mom.
Yes.
And my mother also has a previous marriage before.
Whoa.
Before
Okay, it's a
us.
big family there.
It is a huge one.
Yes. And is it still a close family?
It is. We speak occasionally, but certainly we speak at funerals and weddings.
Yeah.
But it's quite close because I have a family in Atteridgeville from my
Okay.
father's previous marriage.
Yes.
And after
Yeah.
Nkandla, one of them called me to say they're going to vote in a particular way because they don't like what happened. I found it quite strange.
Yeah, I know. In the people of Tswana, they were saying no sputla, no vote. It's a discussion for another time.
Yes.
Take me through your parents' meeting. Apparently, it's quite an interesting way in the way they met.
My parents, how they met. I think they met. My father was a photographer.
Yeah.
And my mother was a domestic worker.
Okay.
And they met because my father used to come to the suburbs to take pictures of the ladies.
Cameraman.
He was a cameraman.
Yes,
Well,
I know those. You noticed how I said it?
Yeah.
Cameraman. They had a thing about them. They would go to people's houses and just take pictures of random people, pretty much.
Certainly.
Yeah.
In this case, they used to frequent the suburbs, and I'm told he used to dress very well and was very popular with the girls.
Yes.
Yes.
and your father's dress sense. Could it have influenced your dress sense? And we don't have to indulge this question now because you're quite a dresser. You look really well when you have to.
Really?
So has it influenced? Are you denying that?
I'm not quite sure, but I can say that both my parents loved clothes, but particularly my father. He was always in a suit. Even at the time when, towards the end of his life, he was an informal trader.
Yes.
But he still thought that when he goes to sell things at the school and he goes to the road with his mobile spaza shop, he still needed to wear his suit. Wow. And certainly on Sunday, he would wear his suit, his best suit.
I hear he taught himself how to read and write.
He did. He was brought up in Daka Kroll, in Bumalanga, in the farms where his mother was born and lived with his uncle. The farmers didn't allow them to go to school.
Yes.
Soon after he left Daka Kroll, he then only learned to read and write.
Wow.
But mostly read the Bible and...
Yes. Was he a strict father? Was it what is the word in that sense? A father whose law reigns supreme in the family?
Absolutely. He was very draconian.
Yeah.
He was the law in the house.
Yeah.
And one of the things he did was that he never understood that people could rest. It's like it's break. When he walks into a house, everyone has to take a position and get busy, because he would ask you, why are you sitting when things need to be done?
Yes.
But he was also strict about, he was strict about working for whatever you needed to benefit from, like the best helping hand being the one at the end of your arm. The other thing he was strict about was never buying goods, stolen goods.
Yes.
When the young boys would come to our house with a radio, there wasn't much electronics then. I think it would be an eye on a radio and a kettle. He would make sure, he would chase them. He would take his stick and run after them, because he believed that if they can steal from other people, they will steal from him. And if he buys from them, he's participating in the crime.
Absolutely. Yes. Any story you remember about your dad that speaks to his rule of law in relation to you in particular? There's a story about you not allowed to wear pants.
Oh, hey, you've done your research, eh? Yes, my father's, I think, old Christianity, that women should wear dresses and hats. He believed that, Christian girls should not wear pants.
Yeah.
And of course, we never wore pants, but we were studying in Swaziland. Meaning, when we were at school, we would wear those pants then, or when we were outside school. And I was now back at home working as a volunteer in the trade union movement. I would go home wearing a skirt, and on my way to Kliptown, which is where I catch the train, I would then change into pants and then go to work in pants throughout the day and then come back. But this one day he discovered that he saw me, because he used to go and buy his supplies from Kliptown too.
Okay. Yeah.
He noticed that I had worn pants, and then he shouted at me. To me, it then looked like he now knows that I wear pants, so there's no point in hiding anymore. So that was the liberation moment.
Yes. Where did you go to school, ma'am?
I went to school mostly in Swaziland.
Okay.
Seventh-day Adventist school in Bugwane, mission school called Methodist School Mahamba, then Evelyn Baring High School, which was also a private Christian school at the time. Okay.
Has that influenced your Christian values in some way?
I believe so, because from morning to sunset, we they integrated religion into our upbringing.
Okay. And what is your connection with Swaziland? Because there's a lot of it apparently in your life and in your history.
My father is Swazi speaking.
Yes.
So his father was originally from Swaziland,
yeah.
and his mother was from Dakhatskrol. Although he grew up in Dakhatskrol, but his father had been from Swaziland and he died. The father died when he was young.
Yeah.
And when he was older, he reconnected with Swaziland in a sense that he was one of the pioneers who started what we regard as the taxi industry today.
Right.
If you recall, the taxi industry was started by people who were driving people locally with bakkies. They would use Chevrolet. He had a Chevrolet and some had Dodge. I think one of his cars was a Dodge. And they would drive people on Friday afternoons to Swaziland for the weekend, the migrant workers, and then come back here on Sunday. Okay. So that was his main connection, or my main connection. But later he took all of us to study in Swaziland because there was a belief that the education there was better.
Interesting.
And yes.
My mom also studied in Swaziland. Her high school studied in Swaziland.
Okay. Which
Felicia Mabuza Sattler also studied in Swaziland.
Yes, a lot of the struggle stalwarts children studied in Swaziland, but most of them were in central Swaziland. Yes. I went to the south.
Yes. Which is fairly rural part of Swaziland.
Which is fairly rural, yes.
Okay. Where did politics become important to you? Do you remember what was happening in your life and in your mindset at the time?
I would say in the 70s, after June 16, I was in Swaziland when June 16 happened, but because we were not in exile, we still came home. I remember in August, there were still things were still smoldering. We had our own Chinatown there by Regina Mundi in Soweto, and it had burnt down, the bars had burnt down. But during that period, lots of struggle activities were happening at that Regina Mundi church. So that would be the time I became physically involved. But before then, my father used to speak fondly about Nelson Mandela. He really had a lot of respect for him. And he used to talk about him being at Robert Island because since he wasn't fully educated, he didn't really know it was Robben Island.
And what did it mean to him, this Robben Island, from that perspective?
Well, what he knew was Mandela, this towering black lawyer, had stood up against apartheid, had defended himself and other prisoners in the Rivonia trial. And I think he sort of was inspired by him. That's why he told us these stories of himself standing up to a magistrate and being and representing himself whenever he was arrested for trading without a license. So that's what I would say the 70s would be the beginning of conscientization. And then the 80s is when I started then getting physically involved with the organizations of the time. I was recalling recently when I gave a speech in honor of Neil Agate, that actually my joining the ANC had to do with his death. Because my friend went to the funeral and met someone there who recruited her, and then that both of them then came to my house in Dlamini and he recruited me as well.
What is your history with the ANC, with the African National Congress? Is there history with the African National Congress?
There is, although the internet still says I'm still a member. I'm not a member. I haven't been a member. I haven't been a member since 2007, and not because I decided to divorce the ANC for bad reasons. It just was for professional reasons. I didn't want to continue the membership. But I have been a member, as I'm saying, since the early 80s. It would have been about 1991 or so when Teddy Mbesi, the guy was speaking about, recruited us.
Okay.
Yes.
What role exactly did you play in the writing of the Constitution of South Africa?
It was several roles. Firstly, when they were working at Kempton Park, we were providing research support and drafts on some of the things. And secondly, when they were now formulating the interim constitution, I helped with the formulation of the inputs for the Gauteng government, which was PWV region.
Yes.
We had a VITS group, or Center for Applied Legal Studies group, led by Feroza Kachalia and Professor Gutro. We looked at the entire constitution and drafted our own submission. And when we had to present to their conference, I was asked by the group to present because Feroza Kachalia couldn't attend. And then when the final constitution was drafted, I was appointed as one of the 11 technical experts to do the preliminary drafts, submit them to the assembly, and review stuff that the assembly has done. Yes.
Okay. I can imagine the importance of that role. You're the ones that draft the documents that get debated by different political formations. What fond memories do you have of that time?
Firstly, just the excitement of being appointed there and working in that space. It was both exciting but also stressful because you draft, but politicians have their own view. You coming as an expert who has studied constitutional law, has been debating these things in academic circles, but they would come with their own point of view. I remember Professor Tandabantu Nhlap, when I had to deal with the sections dealing with customary law and culture, etc. And we wanted the equality clause to trump culture, and we had drafted it along those lines. And we had fairly convinced the theme committee that we're working with. And we learned down the line that they had changed our version, and that culture was now trumping equality. We had to request a meeting where we went back and said, no, this can't happen. In the end, we ended up with a compromise that says subject to this constitution. So it didn't say subject to the equality clause, but basically it meant subject to all of the other rights in the constitution.
It's our constitution is one of the most celebrated in the world. And what do you think about it as we sit here, you and I?
It's a great blueprint. It is a statement of who we think we are and what we want to be, but it's also a vision of the South Africa we want and a bridge to that South Africa. It's really a great constitution. It has, though, been overtaken. I know people still say it's 50 years ahead. It was 50 years ahead at the time we drafted it. I have had an opportunity to look at constitutions now in some parts of Africa, Kenya, Rwanda, and Eastern Europe. For example, most constitutions now have a president elected directly by the public, and most constitutions have a referendum for controversial issues.
In light of our challenges in the country, it's something you wish we had considered?
Having learned what I know now, yes, I think we would have considered the issue of a referendum, the issue of a directly appointed president, but more importantly, proportional representation. When we went for proportional representation, it was to make sure that we have numbers, but we now have numbers, but the price we're paying is that the electorate has lost ground because the PR candidates are accountable to their parties, regardless of which party you're talking about. But they're accountable to their parties. They're not accountable to any constituents. Even if they assign them constituencies, they don't assign them constituencies where you live. If, for example, you live here in Waterkloof, they'll give you a constituency in Piet Retief. That constituency has no say even in you being nominated to be on the list.
You've been quoted as saying our constitution is aspirational. It's do you think we'll ever achieve its expectations of our constitution?
We will. Firstly, it's aspirational, but it also affirms who we chose to be, because we were a particular nation at the time where there was legalized injustice, primarily on the grounds of race, gender, and disability. We decided we're not that nation anymore. So to the extent that we said no to discrimination, that's who we are right now. It's not tomorrow. But parts of it are aspirational, like the achievement of equality. We inherited a deeply unequal society, structurally unequal society, because of accumulated advantages and accumulated disadvantages. It will take years to try and do that, and also deal with the mindsets that go with the history of legalized racial stratification, gender stratification, and other forms of discrimination.
You're known to travel the country a lot and do imbizos with communities. What do ordinary South Africans say about South Africa?
Most South Africans are proud to be part of this country. Most believe that we have something good going on and we have a lot to give to the world. A lot of them are concerned about corruption. A lot of them are concerned about poverty, and some of them are concerned about social justice.
What do you admire the most about South Africans?
Their sunny nature. I think South Africans, they are a joyful nation and they give joy. Whenever I speak to visitors, foreigners, tourists, one thing they find extremely exciting is the fact that South Africans are friendly and they're always smiling, they're always laughing. I think it gives them a lot of joy. And I think that's good, that capacity to be happy, the capacity to be joyful. This other thing I like about South Africa is that the average person in South Africa is helpful. We speak about Ubuntu as an African thing, but I really think Ubuntu is a South African thing. Just the average person is decent, is helpful. Of course, there are oddities, and everywhere on earth there are oddities, but the average person is caring, compassionate, and helpful. Yes.
I hear the chuckle coming with the reality that human beings will always be human beings. That's why I talk about my next question. What infuriates you about South Africans equally?
I would say injustice is one thing that as South Africans have to tackle. Particularly things like gender injustice, just injustice against the ones that are the most vulnerable against us. I mean, the injustice against the most vulnerable among us. It could be the LGBTI community, or women, or children. I think what maybe not infuriates me as such, it just saddens me that we have become a nation where some of the things we do, even animals do better than us. We used to have a cartoon when we were in the Department of Justice, where I don't know which cartoonist drafted it, but it was about violence against women and children. So it's an animal who looks at us and says, what's wrong with these people? Even animals don't rape their little ones. But they do that. So in some respects, we have descended beneath animals. And as a Christian, I want to believe that, we are made in the image of God. We have to command everything that is on earth, which God has allowed us to command it. But if we now sink beneath those things in terms of our own ethics, then we need to think about, do we then deserve to be the kings of this world?
And tell me though, because you're fairly optimistic in the statement you just made now, I'm sure we'll be okay, right?
We will be.
We're destined for greater things as a country.
I think yes. I think we are such a resilient nation. Look at South Africa from when it was founded in 1910, or even before then. If you look at the nations here, from those created by Shaka, Zwide, and all of those leaders, I get a sense that people are resilient and are always able to triumph over very difficult situations. And we've created, I think another thing is, as a country, we've created great leaders. Whether you're talking about Shaka, you're talking about Mandela, Pixley Kaseme, and some of the most powerful women we've ever created, Charlotte Maxeke, Olive Schreiner, Helen Suzman,
yes.
etc. So I would say that we've been blessed to follow these people, which says to me that we have greatness in all of us. We just have to call it up and use it for our own advancement, which is a divine right to advance yourself, but primarily in service to humanity for greater good. Yes.
Where does the sense of justice come from within you? Because it's something you've been practicing for quite a while.
It has been. For example, when people ask me, what are you going to do when you're no longer public protector? I always say that I'm not losing my role as a public protector, because I was always protecting the public. I just got the title for the last 7 years to do it with authority, because I honestly think that if you give a person a title to do something they've never done before, they're not going to be able to do it. So the sense of justice comes from experiencing injustice in my own life.
True.
I'm a child of apartheid. I witnessed the consequences of the Black Administration Act that I spoke to you about. I also witnessed gender injustice. Women in Soweto being forced to leave their homes because relatives would crop out of the woodworks, literally.
Yes.
When your husband dies under the Black Administration Act, women were perpetual minors, and if you didn't have a son, relatives would come and kick you out of your own house and take over in the name of the law. It was a distortion of the law, of course, but it happened.
Jeez.
Then people being arrested, those things about people being arrested for standing up against injustice. Those are part of the things that I experienced, yes.
Do you think we're doing enough now to promote social justice?
A good question, given the fact that I'm meeting here with with young entrepreneurs, but serious leaders of our country. Young is misleading. You're actually talking about the heart of corporate South Africa in this room, and you're talking about leaders who have a global footprint. Which is one of the great things about South Africans, by the way, is you walk around the world, every time you see a brand that is South African, you say, wow, I know these people, that's us. And that just shows the amount of leadership in this country. And sometimes we undermine ourselves and say there's no leadership in this country. We should say there's no leadership in some areas of society. But generally, there's great leadership in this country. But I think we could do more about social justice. I know that all of us feel that the state has dropped the ball, and I do agree that the state has dropped the ball. If we take, for example, fees must fall, it really is not proper that there are students literally who can only afford 5,000 rand to register. At the University of Pretoria, some of them can't even afford 5,000 rand to register at the beginning of the year. So some corporates have a fund now that allows these young ones to register with that 5,000 rand. But once they've registered with that 5,000 rand, they have no accommodation, they have no money for fees, they have no food, some of them. Some of them have just bread for the whole day. So in that case, I think corporate South Africa can assist while we're getting government to do the right thing, claw back money from wrong causes, from maladministration, from corruption, from choices that are not in line with Section 237 of the Constitution, which says we should prioritize constitutional responsibilities. But in the meantime, the reality is that there is a need. And we've called, as the perpetrator South Africa, we put 20,000 on the table. And we've invited corporate South Africa and said, please put something. We've asked for two things, actually. Just firstly, if we could find an NGO that already does social justice management to manage this fund, we put in 20,000. At the Black Management Forum's event, more money was collected. I think we ended up with 670,000. What we then need is still we need a fund manager and we need more takers too. What it would do, it won't solve every problem on earth, but you know better yourselves as people who are running very successful businesses that you can't do nothing just because you can't solve all of the problems of the world. You just have to solve the little problems you can solve, and the little problems you solve make a world of difference to the people who are impacted. When I was on radio 2 days ago about fees must fall at birth, this mother called and said her child has registered and has only paid 5,000 rand. Why they are hanging on to closing schools is that her child will be losing anyway. So if her child is going to lose, everyone must lose. But think about it, if we can solve the problems of the destitute and desperate ones and say, how much do you owe from this 670,000? For those legitimate ones, can we assist? Then we're not going to have the few who are really desperate prevent the rest who need to finish their education. And we know right now from industry, somebody has raised the question that industry needs this output. In all areas, we need an output of these people. The universities themselves need the space for the matriculants. And some of these young ones need the money and the freedom of starting a job in January next year. And all of these things are being threatened by the current situation.
You seem to believe that corporate should be playing a big role in the space of fees must fall. I will ask this two-pronged question.
Yes.
One, do you believe that the South African government can afford to carry this burden of free higher education? And two, what role truly can corporate South Africa right now, today, what role can they play in helping this challenge that we're facing?
Okay, thank you so much, David. It's a good question. Firstly, government, I don't think government can afford to have free higher education for everyone right now in October 2016. It's a planning thing. What I think government needs to consider is rethinking the commission. Instead of having a commission, put together a bunch of actuarial scientists who are going to look at birth rates and number of people per year, and then do a planning ahead for the next 50 years and for the next 100 years. And this year it will cost this much, it's going to cost. And then also look at then the economy. How is it going to grow during those years? Economists and actuarial scientists together. I honestly think that's what you need to do. It's not something that you can just do that like that and achieve. Secondly, it's going to be a declining thing. Just about looking at a progressive way to deal with these fees must fall. They can't just fall like rapidly. It has to be something that is properly planned. And I think the young ones are also aware of that it can't just happen overnight. Corporate South Africa, can it play a greater role? With this one, I'm thinking that part of it is the social investment into some fund that can just deal with the current people who feel that for them, they have nothing to lose if the year is lost. Yeah. Because for them, the year is lost anyway. And we need to look at how can we help them. But Corporate South Africa can assist South African government in looking at the economics of it, because we have to look at the statistics of the nation over a long period of time. And I don't think the young ones fully appreciate that. At the moment, we're just looking at the fact that we can pull money away from corruption, we can pull money away from useless investments, we can grow the economy by having more startups, but we still need to know what the future holds. We still need to plan 50 years on or even 100 years on. Because once you say fee, there will be no fees. You should know that you could afford it forever, not just for this year or the following year. The other area, though, where corporate South Africa could help, and I'm now speaking of these highly accomplished leaders in this room, is a BEE model that is slightly different from the model we have. I don't know how many of you watched Dragon's Den.
Yes.
I think a model that is about, like, similar to Dragon's Den, could be a better BEE model where you already accomplished and you have your own company. You invest in the small guy who has his spaza shop. You invest in a small guy who has a startup business. Instead of the little guy investing in your company and then playing golf most of the time, because already you doing the work, or you may put them in some place where you call it government relations or governmental relations. They invest in yours. No, you invest in theirs. Then you provide some kind of mentorship, guidance, and market exposure. It's just a thought, having seen it work in Dragon's Den. And I know sometimes people want to own their company 100%, but one of the things I learned in Dragon's Den was 100% of nothing is worse than 50% of something. Because if you invest and you are an accomplished business person, you're going to bring more ideas around sustainability of the business than the small business person. With all good intentions, the small business person might not know what works in a sustainable way.
What is, in your opinion, the function of the public protector?
The public protector's job is to protect the public against excesses in the exercise of state power and control over public resources. And that protection comes from working with the public by receiving complaints or initiating investigations to establish if government has acted improperly, reporting on that impropriety and taking appropriate remedial action. Sometimes it's not improper action, it's just prejudicial action.
Yes.
So that we work more like a McCarthy in the vendor culture. I don't know if you watch Mubango. If you do watch Mubango, you'll see she's in every place, just listening to what everyone is saying about what's going wrong here. They say a public protector in Sweden, it's an ombudsman, is the eyes and ears of the king, but in the modern world it would be, of course, the government and the voice of the people. And whoever is in power, traditionally it would be the king, ignores her at his own peril, and a wise king listens. It's really mostly that. But in South Africa, on the other hand, the public protector doesn't just whisper. When there's serious wrongdoing of a conduct failure nature, like corruption, fraud, or unethical conduct, the public protector has his or her own authority to fix the problem. And that's what the Constitutional Court said in the EFF matter, that unlike the traditional ombudsman, you don't just whisper and tell them to fix it. You can also order that things be fixed. And
you have a relationship between the presidency and the public protector has been in the headlines for a while now. But you have a dotted line to the presidency as an office. Am I correct in saying that?
We do, yes. The public protector's relationship is principally with Parliament, but because we are, the president is our client when it comes to enforcement of the Executive Members Ethics Act. We have a dotted line to him or her when it comes to the enforcement of that act.
And has Because the reality of the challenges that we are facing as South Africans, and you in particular, we get a sense that the relationship between your office and the presidency is not a harmonious one. Is it a fair conclusion to make?
Not really. I think it has ups and downs. We get headwinds and we get cool weathers. It's not a continuously bumpy relationship.
Yeah.
It's just a relationship that twice has been tested in Nkandla, and it's currently being tested. But again, when I sit with the president, it's a cordial relationship. I met with him
yesterday, 2 days ago.
No, that one
you were
didn't
meant to
take
meet with him
place.
yesterday.
We met with him. We met with him on the 6th, on Thursday.
Yeah.
And it was a harmonious relationship. But just for people who, before you judge, you must walk in someone's shoes. I've heard people say, oh, we can fix this office, we can have a better relationship with people. We have a good relationship with government, and it's mostly through the fact that we talk to government. We try to find common ground in terms of the values that underpin our democracy, and we communicate cordially with government. But there are times when the only way you can fix that relationship is if you ignore the truth.
True.
And as a public protector, our job is just to do what we consider to be right, and what's right is determined by the Constitution, the law, and principles of good administration. And
you've investigated in your time as public protector over 60,000 cases, some not so sensational, some not making headlines. Can you mention one or two of stories that you feel have impacted strongly in a particular segment of our society, and yet it didn't even make headlines?
Certainly, it would be whistleblower cases that we've handled. For example, one is called, they called it the Justice, where a whistleblower was eventually let go of because she was depressed and wasn't coming to work. But the long story was because the alleged wrongdoers were not brought to book, they made her life impossible, and for 4 years she was out of the system. When she came to us, initially the Department of Justice was standing by the decision that it made, so we wrote the report, and it was called, they call it Justice, because they are the Department of Justice. But after we had very good negotiations with the department realized that it had gone wrong, and then the report's name was changed to, they called it Justice, recognizing that they had now finally realized the difference between justice and the way they had acted. Another case that for me, from a business point of view, is an interesting case that we think could have come to the media if it heard, is a business person in Eastern Cape, Mr. Gqoga, who built RDP houses fully with the top structure, what they call a top structure and construction. And when he wanted to be paid, he was only paid for minus the top structure. The argument from government was twofold. One was, with the top structure, the money had gone and somebody had only given him verbal authority to build the top structure. They hadn't given him a written, it wasn't a written instruction to go ahead after the money ran out. But the money ran out because government decided to use they gave them a grant from national, and that grant is called a conditional grant, and the conditional grant can only be used for the specified purpose for which it was given. That grant was for RTP housing, but they'd used it for something else. When this matter came up, the main defense from government was, we don't know you, Mr. Business Person, because you were a subcontractor. He went to a court of law, and a court of law said, yes, you have no local standard because your link to government should be contractual, and your contract is not with government, it is with a subcontractor. When it first came to us, the investigator in the Eastern Cape agreed and said, yes, there's no contract. And then when it came to us in Pretoria in review, we said, wait a moment, we don't investigate the breach of contract. We investigate improper conduct, which takes the form of maladministration, abuse of power, and all forms. And then in this case, we looked at Was there maladministration? Yes. The conditional grant was used for something else. Was somebody harmed by the maladministration? Yes. Mr. Kocha built a full house, which houses have now been given to the community in the name of government, which then makes him a donator of the top structure against his will.
Yeah.
So once we've asked the second question, was somebody harmed? We then look at harm, prejudice, or suffered an injustice. How do we place them as close as possible to where they've been? If government had done the right thing, we then said government should just pay the money. Because we're not enforcing the law of contract, we're redressing the consequences of maladministration, and we then said government should pay him.
Do you think the landmark cases that you've investigated from SABC, Nkandla, and so forth have played a role in bringing to our attention, to all of us, attention of the Public Protector's Office? Do you think it has done a good enough job of marketing the importance of the Public Protector's Office?
Certainly, they did a good job in letting everyone know that the Public Protector exists, which has helped us. We have a constitutional responsibility to be accessible to all persons and communities. So that was great. It was also one of the areas of impact is highlighting the importance of ethics, because usually we enforce the criminal law, but we don't look at ethical governance. So that was important. And bring in the issues of corporate governance in state-owned enterprises, SABC being one. But the unintended consequence is that a grandmother in postman spec thinks we only investigate big issues that involve the president and top people. So that's the unintended consequence. They don't know that in Nala we were called by ordinary people who asked us to investigate and that the toilets were not flushing and there was excrement everywhere. When we investigate, we found that they literally built toilets with pipes to nowhere, and that was the name of the report. But it didn't get the same kind of sensationalism, such as secure in comfort or when ethics and government fail.
You always give your reports names, like the names that you're mentioning now. It sounds like there's a committee of creatives who come up with these names. How does that process come along? And which ones can you remember? I think on point, I forgot what you called it. There was
on the point of tenders.
On the point of tenders. They always have these cool names. And who comes up with these names?
Everyone. In the Public Protector, we believe that everyone is a leader. And you don't lead in your area of competence. In other words, yes, you are a leader primarily. For example, your job is your cleaner. You've got to understand the connection between us delivering a service to Gogo Dlamini or to a business person or to government and your cleaning. But at the same time, you're not confined to cleaning, because everything else that happens, to the extent that you have a competence, you can contribute. The reports are initially named by the investigator. Then a think tank of that investigators group reviews the draft. A national think tank reviews it. If we still don't find a name, it then comes to me. I remember with Secure in Comfort, it was really named the same day it was being released by somebody in the communications team. So it's
that's
literally,
literally
anyone can come up with a name, but the primary responsibility rests with the investigator.
Okay. Are you well-resourced, ma'am?
Hopelessly under-resourced. It's a historical problem that the office was a branch of the Department of Justice. When it was separated from the tree to operate on its own, there was no looking at then. If you're now starting a new tree, it must have its own roots, it must have its own stem. At the moment, we've been battling, mostly asking for additional investigators. Over the years, we got a little bit more investigators than when we started, but the administration itself is now failing to deal with these additional responsibilities. For example, we are a professional organization. We have no training center. The only training center we have is in Durban. it doesn't belong to us. It belongs to the African Ombudsman and Mediators Association, even though we manage it. Which means even if we want our people trained, we have to go to our colleagues in the rest of Africa and ask for permission to send people for training in Durban. But they can't give too much to one country. But for us as a Public Protector South Africa, we're hopelessly under it. And we don't have an electronic case management system. It's a major difficulty. We can't the one we had, and we've been asking for money from government since to replace it.
Do you know why national government doesn't see the need to fund you well?
Well, national government did see the need to fund me at the beginning. The organogram was approved. And then there was a change of heart at the portfolio committee level. But the reason we have not received the money is not because of that change of heart. Is when government hit this whole fiscal crisis, the approach from government has been that everyone must cut down. And currently, the argument is, we didn't even cut anything from you. Instead, we've been giving you a bit of increments, which is true. But as I indicated, is that you're giving a bit of increments to a branch that has fallen off its tree, and that really can't allow the branch to survive. We needed to reconsider the structure and reconceive the Public Protector as a whole government department, the equivalent of a government department. You won't believe that our IT system has one guy who's a director and 3 young ones who are at a clerical position.
Jeez. And that's a whole department.
That's a whole department. That's IT.
Wow.
HR, again, there's just one person for recruitment, one person for that. It affects Gogo Dlamini, because for us to investigate, as you know, as people who run businesses, is that your corporate support determines the speed with which you deliver. If you're delivering cars to people, how fast are people procuring the parts? How fast are people getting temporary staff if somebody is not available? Determines how much resources you have at operations. And at this stage, our corporate support is battling. Yes.
Let us shift our attention to Nkandla case for a second. Who lodged the complaint?
An ordinary member of the public lodged it, and then later other members of the public. Eventually the DA joined, but the DA joined much later. I think it was 4 complaints down the line when the DA joined. Because it's often said that we investigate matters that have been lodged by political parties. But the people who say those things know the truth.
That they come from a different area completely.
They do, yes.
And how long did your office take to investigate this?
It took more than 2 years. It was launched, Nkandla was originally launched in 2012, towards the end of 2011, and we started with the investigation in 2012. It launched in about 2011, around November thereabout, and we only finished it in 2014.
It took a while. What challenges did you face, and was it the hardest case you've ever had to deal with in office?
No, I think for me it's the legal ones that have been, like the Xocha one that I've mentioned. For us, it's always the ones that raise questions of law that we found difficult. For example, against the rules, the subs leases was a difficult one because it was the first time we decided that the lease must be reversed, or even in courts we hadn't found precedent to that effect. Nkandla was politicized. I think it was managing the human relations that was difficult, but the investigation itself was pretty straightforward because it was clear what the rules were. We always look at what happened, what should have happened. Is there a discrepancy between what happened and what should have happened? And if there's a discrepancy, is it material enough for us to call it improper conduct?
Do you sometimes feel like an outsider when you do these investigations, and particularly in referring to the Nkandla case, because you were vilified, you were spat upon, you were called names? It was that's why I got a sense that maybe it was a rather tricky one to investigate.
Yes. Those headwinds I felt those headwinds, but they were not as terrible as people might have thought because the team was behind me. Everyone who insults me thinks they're insulting me. The team feels they're the ones who are being insulted because usually it would have been their view that we should go a particular way, and the team would have convinced me. So it operates a little bit like the team is the prosecutor, I'm the judge.
Okay.
If I make a finding, it's a win for them. If somebody's insulting me, they're insulting an entire team. So I get the support from the team. We got lots of public support. But secondly, virtually every minister I met in private was in my corner. It was just when the vote came that I was surprised. But I also understood that people have to do what they think they must do.
Actually, that brings up my next question. Is it always the case that in private they support you and in public they don't?
I think in private I've received, yes, lots of support.
Yeah.
Yes.
Are you a spy, ma'am?
Wow. No, I'm not a spy. It's a stupid allegation, though. I feel insulted, not that I'm being called a spy. I feel insulted that government decided to investigate something that was patently stupid. Not the allegation that you're a spy. It's just they got a person to do a shoddy job in terms of framing the allegations. There's 3 spy stories that are not talking to each other. In the one version, my handler is a judge. In the one version, an American professor is my handler. In the other version, a politician is my handler.
Jeez. And
Say
all of them
one person.
don't connect.
They don't connect. But I'm also a spy who is Mossad, MI6, CIA. How do you work for all of them? But the last one was the one that government decided to investigate was the most bizarre of them all, because it was a blog that was on the internet for only about 4 days. And the allegations with that, I'm spying on African presidents for the American government using my counterparts in those countries. If you look at the distance between me and the president, that's the same situation as my colleague. Would Americans be so dumb to ask a public protector-like person in those countries to spy for them? So they get the information, I get it second-hand, they get it third-hand from me. It just doesn't make sense.
They might as well go straight to the source. They might as well do it themselves.
Absolutely, but stupidly also, I don't even have a code name. my spy, they've circulated on the internet my CIA card. I'm just me. I'm just Thuli Madonsela, not agent something. The emails that government took seriously and decided to investigate that are exchanged between me and my handlers, they're written in my personal name. They're from Thuli Madonsela. I sign off as Thuli Madonsela. My email address is thulimadonsela@gmail.com. But what kind of stupidity is that? Surely the CIA has code names for its spies. Even the picture itself, the CIA didn't have its own camera to take a picture of its agent. They pulled the one that is on the posters in the pub protector. That's the one that is on my CIA card. So I just think I felt insulted that somebody did such a harsh job
in making you a spy.
In making me a spy. Although of course they made me rich because I have $15 million in a Cayman Islands account. But for that whole information is not given to the discerning, it's given to the converted, because they don't state which bank in the Cayman Islands. They just give an account number.
Jeez. If you had to be a spy,
I would do a better job than them spying on me.
I guess.
Absolutely, just based on watching movies.
I would do a better job. I'm getting there. If you had to choose to be a spy, would you choose to be an American spy or a Russian spy? Which one would you
KGB or
CIA?
Nah, I wouldn't want to be either. Do you see those people killing people? And then they kill you too?
That's true.
Or at least that's what I know from the movies.
My code name is 007, so my favorite one is 007. I can imagine you probably have a cool code as well.
Well, they didn't even give me a cool code. I'm still sad about that.
Yes. The General Secretary of the ANC, African National Congress, this past week, says you've saved them from themselves. At times, that's the role that you've played. What do you have to say to that?
I think that was magnanimous of Mr. Mantashe, and we can complain about his coming too late. But for me in life, I believe that better late than never.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let me open the floor to members to ask questions.
So we're all sitting here on tenterhooks with your new report about state capture, and we kind of were hoping that you'd tell us more about what the report, what we can expect to read in this report. And if you can't, I'd like to get your opinion about whether you believe the ANC can sort itself out before 2019 or whether all hope is lost.
If I answered that question, I would be accused of regime change, politicking, and endorsement. So I'm not in a position. I think where there's a will, there's a way. I'm certain that ANC or anybody else, a business person who has learned lessons from doing things wrong, can always change. But it would require stopping certain things, it would require doing new things, and it might require revisiting your leadership. Just from a business perspective, is that you always have to look at what is your problem. Is it a leadership problem? Is it a structural problem? Is it a habits problem? And what are you going to do to change the things that are stopping you from achieving the dream you have? It's going to be a report that tells the story of what do we know as of now and what still needs to be tied up, and how will the rest of the story be tied up. The issues are simple. You heard that the president says he has not been informed. He has been informed since March because it's the same allegations by Mcebisi Jonas, Fakey Mentor, and Mr. Temba Maseko. And then there's a fourth allegation, though, by an unmentioned person. But he doesn't claim to be a party to anything. He's just asked us to ask whether it was proper for cabinet to get involved in the private dispute between the banks and the Gupta-aligned companies. Has this been done before? And shouldn't this have been done by the NCC or the bank ombudsman? And if so, isn't there a corruption? That's all really we're investigating, whether the president enabled the family to do what he did or looked the other way. That's all we're looking at.
Does it seem deliberate that he's delaying, these are just delay tactics until you are out of office?
I don't know what to make of it. All I can say is the president announced to me and to the nation that he would answer questions on Thursday, the 6th. Before the 6th, we got a letter on the 5th that was just asking whether a newspaper article was telling the truth when we said we've now made findings, and there was some other administrative question they asked us. There was no suggestion that we had submitted things late, that the president is not capable of answering us. When we got there in the boardroom, we're waiting to answer questions. The lawyer springs this question that he would prefer that this matter be handled by the next public protector. She might have a different style, etc. You'll see it in the report, what he said, because we decided to reproduce verbatim what he said that day. Because for us, it's not about whose style is what. It's about, we don't choose our judges. Yeah. We go to the courts that has been chosen for us. Then the second time, and then said he hadn't been given things on time. Yesterday, it was announced to the nation again that they will answer questions on affidavit, and it will be given to us earlier yesterday morning. And then we'll meet later in the day to clear up if there are any misunderstandings. We sat there in the morning with nobody telling us that the meeting is not happening. We kept being told that there's a letter. No, the legal advisor was going to talk to us. And then later we were told a letter is coming. Bang, the letter comes back and tells us there will be no answering. We must produce witnesses. It's for us, as we indicated in our media release, it's a problem not only that the president is asking for these things, but it's how it has been managed. Because if, for example, we're told up front for the meeting on the 6th, if we had been told on time that they need more time, we would have shifted the meeting. Instead of losing the meeting, we would have shifted the meeting. Yesterday, if we had been told on time, last week when we met with him on Thursday, that he would like to put questions to witnesses, would have arranged from Thursday to yesterday for collecting those questions from him and putting them to the witnesses. And that was not given to us on time. So every time it's like we're playing a chess game. Every time we think we're moving, a surprise move happens, and then we lose time in the process.
Do you, ma'am, there's also a sense that you are in a rush to conclude this before you're out of office? Is that the right impression to have about it, or is it because you've been working on it for so long?
No, I'm in a rush to conclude this matter in office. I did say to the president that I take a different view. The president's legal advisor said it's not important to conclude this investigation. I think it's important because it casts a cloud in the executive of South Africa. That has investment implications, it has trust implications. You need it cleared as fast as possible. So that's one reason. The second reason is that it's an Executive Members Ethics Act matter. According to that act, it should have been completed within 30 days. So we don't invent the timelines. It's in a statute that says a matter. And then it says if we can't conclude it within 30 days, we should advise the president. But the presumption is that if you had a duty to complete something in 30 days, you should try and conclude it soon thereafter.
True.
So we're not inventing the agency. But thirdly, you will see the president's statement yesterday saying that it's not a part-heard matter. This matter will end up in court. We expect it to end up in court. I do believe that the presiding officer matters because the presiding officer would have said in interviews that you have institutional memory. It's important that what you know you download into the report before you go. Ideally, with judges, if you have a part-heard matter, a judge who has retired comes back to conclude this matter. But with the power protector, because it's a fixed term, it would be proper to come back and deal with the part-heard matter, because in what capacity would you do that? So the best you can do really is to wrap up what you know. I honestly think the president ought to be happy that we're helping him to find out whether a deputy minister in his cabinet is lying and bringing the whole cabinet into disrepute by lying. I think if it happened in my staff, I would want it cleared as soon as possible, because it's bringing my entire unit into disrepute and creating a trust deficit between our stakeholders and my institution.
What is your understanding of what your successor will do? Because you obviously can't finish the whole report before Friday. Yes. I don't know what time you knock off on Friday, but I don't think you'll finish it. What do you think your successor will do? She's been reported as saying she's got a lot of old cases that she needs to look into, and she also won't do anything. She'll do what she does without fear or favor. What is your understanding? Will she continue this proactively, or will other things get precedence?
I have no reason, to doubt her good faith. I suspect that when she was talking about cases older than a year, she would not have known that we operate on the basis of multiple statutes. Because when she worked for the Public Protector, she had a fairly junior position. A senior investigator is level 2 from entry, and she would never have investigated Executive Members Ethics Act, because they've always been part of what the old Public Protector referred to as special investigations. These ones are the timeline is determined by statute. And obviously, I've indicated to the media that when we meet with her, we'll explain to her the various statutes that regulate our work, and that this one is in terms of the Executive Members Ethics Act, and it must proceed. And I have no reason to believe that when everything has been explained to her, she will do the right thing. I do worry, though, about the presidency putting pressure on her, because it is on the record now that she was nominated by the presidency to this position, even though she was nominated by a junior staff member in the presidency, but it was from the presidency.
Yeah.
Now, if the presidency now puts pressure that this matter must be done by her, I just worry that it puts pressure on her that when the junior staff member nominated her, there may have been an expectation.
True.
And I just think it's unfair to her that this burden should be put on her.
What do you think of President Jacob Zuma?
I have no... I think he's a pleasant person when I meet with him. He's the president of South Africa. He has indicated to me that he has been misadvised, for lack of a better word, by his advisors.
Yeah. And but in general, because the things that you're saying today with regards to this case in particular, to the Gupta case, gives an impression that he's tricky in the way he deals with things, or he's ill-advised, as you put it. What is your general impression, ma'am? You've had a lot of dealings with him. Let's face it. So what is your general opinion of him?
The general impression of him, I have found that he's cordial. He doesn't allow his feelings, if he has any feelings towards me, to cloud the way he deals with me. My meetings with him have always been very cordial, and sometimes we laugh. And even the last meeting that we had, much as we were haggling and taggling about the date, there were moments of laughter.
Yeah.
I'd just like to ask, however, reading in Eyewitness News 25 minutes ago, Eyewitness News has learnt that a formal summons has now been issued for the Finance Minister, Pravin Gordhan. The rand has just tanked to 14 rand 22 to the dollar. What would your thoughts be on that?
I think if I may have to give an impression, it would be that executive authority in the Republic rests with the President. It doesn't rest with Cabinet. But there are things that government needs to deal with as a group. I have no authority to say whether Mr. Gordhan should be arrested or should not be arrested. I do believe, though, that when government does things, we have to think in a systems way. When you run a country, it's like a big business, and you have to think that when you touch a little thing there, it might look like a little thing there, but it might have implications for the entire system. So I do hope that when government made that decision, there was a systems thinking behind it, and the ramifications have been considered. Given the fact that we also investigated this matter, our own conclusion, unfortunately we didn't have the capacity to write the report, our own conclusion at the time was that if there was anything wrong, the Cabinet would have been the party to intervene. I also, as a public protector, do know that my counterparts in Singapore and Malaysia, where I've been, have a surveillance capacity. In fact, they were asking us, how on earth can you do these investigations that include fraud and corruption without surveillance capacity? And when we're doing this investigation, we realized that one of our incapacities is the inability to have surveillance capacity. And for me, a SARS that doesn't have surveillance capacity is an incapacitated SARS. But how they were supposed to go about it is an issue then that is between them and the Cabinet.
Where to next for you?
I'm planning to have a long sabbatical, which probably, which is likely, based on the discussions I'm having with Harvard, is likely to take me to Harvard for the greater part, and a little bit time of at Oxford teaching. I was invited to teach for the whole year at Oxford, but I've decided, if things work well, to join a group of has-beens at Harvard for a year, and then go into teaching and practicing law in 2018. But I'll also be part of civil society, focusing on issues of rule of law, constitutionalism, and social justice. My job in 2018 involves me having a base at a university and then practicing law on a more part-time basis.
And writing a book as well, I've heard.
That's next year. Part of the sabbatical is to write a book, 2 books actually. One is a personal story, the other one is on administrative law.
Okay. So you talk about love a lot. Yes. Not romantic love, love for people.
Yes.
Give us a concluding statement in that regard, and what inspires that conversation of love very often.
I think I would quote, I think it was Jimi Hendrix, who said that when the world goes back to the power of love and abundance, the love of power, we will have peace. And I think in our time, we do need a return to love. A love of ourselves first, and then a love of fellow human beings, regardless of how they're packaged in terms of race, gender, culture, religion, or any other thing. And I honestly think that loving ourselves and loving others is one of the foundations for national and global peace.
That is so true. Ladies and gentlemen, our beloved public protector, Thuli Madonsela.